Okay, guys, so
And
it
I'll certainly
is
put
two
them in the
o'clock,
text chat.
and we need to get started. I wanted to welcome everyone to the VWEC Expert Series. This is part 2 of our Summer of AI series, and the name of this presentation is STEAMy, STEAMY AI and Natural Language Processing. Rhiannon Chatnoir, or also known as Joyce Bettencourt, and Lyr Lobo, also known as Cynthia Calongne, um, are here to give us this presentation. Now, Rhi might not show up for a little while, but she's trying her hardest, so we're gonna let Lyr start us out. I wanted to remind everyone that this session is being live streamed and recorded and posted to a YouTube channel, which I'm copying here and putting into the chat. And our speakers welcome active participation, so please feel free to post any questions in the chat and they will be answered immediately, or we are also monitoring the chat, so if it somehow gets overlooked, we will ask at the end of the presentation. We will be so for this particular series, the speakers are presenting they're exploring the use of AI in education and the arts. This session features AI use in virtual worlds, teaching AI for ethical use, safety, explainable AI, research, and prompt generation to create artifacts for sparking creativity and inspiration. So Cynthia is a pioneer for education in virtual worlds. Her doctoral research investigated interaction design in virtual environments. She now conducts research at Virtual Harmony and Game Simulation Design, and in 2018 she wrote 2 grant proposals for AI safety and ethical use. Joyce is a creative director of the Vesuvius Group, a collective studio specializing in developing online, immersive, and social environments for community building. Since October 2012, she has been hosting weekly nonprofit community of practice meetings at Nonprofit Commons in the Second Life community, where she serves as co-chair. She's also the co-founder and vice president of Avicon and served as president from 2010 to 2014. So, I'm going to quit talking and give the stage to Lyr at this point.
Hey, thank you for that warm welcome, Marie, and hello, everyone. Hey, it's Friday, and we're excited to be part of this series, the AI Expert Series. What you see on screen is a mid-journey version of Rhiannon Chatnoir, better known as Joyce Bettencourt, and that's from her live photo that's been enhanced by AI. And then on the right, I took my virtual world photo that you see on the ad for this session, and I used Stable Diffusion to improve it. And the first improvement, I had a horse's head for a face and my hair. And I had to laugh because I had said a red-haired maiden riding a horse, the Lady of Shalott, something lovely. And there I was, right? So we're featuring our AI art versions of ourselves, but we're not going to just talk about AI art, right? And I'm not going to talk about history because we only have 40 minutes, but AI is not new. You'll notice from 1941 on, we've been thinking about it and strategizing for it. And of course, much of my background on the left is in expert systems. In the early days, I used to teach classes in it, in roles-based systems. And of course, those are a solved problem, which means that they're no longer interesting in the research. That's why you don't hear about them, because we can model the knowledge of an expert and share that with novices quite easily. I even showed classes how to, in a day or two, to design these systems, to populate them with if-then-else rules. That's what we mean. And then to do forward or backward chaining, which means to either predict something that's going to happen next week, like the weather, or to deduce something that occurred in the past, like a crime, right? A body's on the floor and we have to figure out who did it, So we have all these different ways of structuring logic. And please feel welcome to put questions in the text chat. I am looking at it, and if you do have your microphone on, please mute it because we are recording. We thank you. So, what about machine learning? Well, I've given you 4 wonderful resources today, and my doctoral students love it. I teach an AI class in real world decision making, and it's kind of a breadth of knowledge course where we look at a variety of industries and think about where we're going with these technologies. And let's see, let me populate the text chat with a few of these. The first one is on neural networks, and it's by 3Blue, 1Brown, and it's a wonderful little introduction for any person. So you don't have to be a computer scientist to understand what they're talking about. It's well illustrated and it's short. So I do recommend it. Don't go looking at it right now. Save that for later, okay? So let's look at the next one. This image on the left is Rhiannon's robot. Isn't he cute? And of course, she later you will see a version where wearing a chef's hat and cooking. And here I think we're holding a recipe book, but I'm not sure. And you can see some of the prompt below it. And if it's hard to read, I did distribute a little HUD version of the slides. It's fully editable, fully modifiable, even the script is. And you can edit it and drag it proportionally larger or smaller to fit your needs, or just take it off. It doesn't matter. And then these 3 links you see here are from the TensorFlow group at Google, and it's wonderful. It's on sentiment analysis. And this illustrates how we conduct natural language processing using tokenization, and it's part of their NLP Zero to Hero course. It's on YouTube. And of course, all 3 of those videos together are about 16 minutes. So they're very short. And in the comments, they give you access to the code so you can run it yourself and test it and see how these things work. So this is not a workshop, but I love to give you tools to let you experience what do we mean by natural language processing. Well, do you remember the old days when we didn't have GUIs, graphical user interfaces? Most of you probably don't. But believe it or not, in the 90s, the early 80s, no, even before, because the first Mac was released to the public in 1984, right? But of course, the GUI that we know and love today was introduced by Xerox PARC, right? The Palo Alto Research Center. And before that, we had all command line processing. And Ben Schneiderman out of the University of Maryland is considered, he's called the father of direct manipulation. Just wiggle your fingers for a moment, okay? He gave us the ability to directly manipulate content on screen, whether it's pointing and clicking, dragging and dropping, full page editing, line editing, you name it. And so he took us out of the dark ages of the command line prompt to what you enjoy today, whether you're a Mac user, a Windows user, or you're kicking it Linux with a GUI, right? And so these videos here give you a taste of the process. And the reason I introduce him is he said we would never accomplish natural language processing. And the problem with never is no matter when you say it, and he said it like 30, 40 years ago, um, times change, right? And he's from the Human Computer Interaction Lab at the University of Maryland, in case you were wondering how to place him. And of course, he's written the Bible on how we think about interface design and interaction design and supporting people and their behavior. Now, in the introduction, Marie explained that I am with Virtual Harmony, and that's a group of researchers. We've been working together since 2008, since I wrote an article for the EDUCAUSE Review, their back to school edition. And I was invited to join the group, and it's led by Andy Stricker, Spinoza Quinnell. He's a guy I went to high school with. And then we went to college together. And then I didn't see him for 29 years. And then he called me out of the blue because I wrote that article. I'm looking at the chat, so let me know if you have any questions. And so he invited me to be part of this research team. And on the weekends, we have designed 21 grids of content in Open Simulator. We used to have an archipelago, a military archipelago here in Second Life, but during the great, migration, we lost those regions. But we've been integrating AI into our virtual world experience. And so I'm showing you a little image behind the scenes of some of our website and our. So we have a bibliography that has over 1,500 works that we've woven in to our research and into our practice and into our virtual world synthesis, where we have the Red Queen. How many of you remember the Red Queen from Resident Evil? I know it's, or from Alice in Wonderland. That's probably the thing that you're most familiar with. But we're thinking of AI as not always benevolent. Sometimes it's not as often. That's right, Max. It's not always as easy to use as you'd think. And we use machine learning. We use neural networks. And so some of these technologies you see here, for the AI simulations that you see on screen, that is part of the Mars expedition. If you recall, in 2010, we won $25,000, the grand prize, in the first Federal Virtual World Challenge at Defense Game Tech. And it spearheaded some of our later work. And now we've gone way beyond this, and we've integrated quite a bit of NASA content, and of course have some amazing experiences. But what we also have is we have a system that monitors your behavior if you're playing our games, and it monitors how you think and reason. And it thinks about the things you do and the questions you ask it. You can ask questions of the Red Queen. And it has an ontology, and it will classify what you're doing, and it will think about it and keep ranking and prioritizing and trying to understand it better. So it has this AI assessment piece, and it has analytics. And while we have much of it in OpenSim using open source software, we also have shadowing in the Amazon cloud. We have it on Lambda, and we have it on a couple other resources. We are using SageMaker for those of you who are doing AI and using various tools. And of course, and I am watching the time. I don't want to get nerded out on the tools, right? Um, what's interesting is we were so successful with what we were doing, and Dr. Stricker was writing an AI blog. Every week he would put out a short paper with a lot of research in it and send it to 129 members of the Pentagon and around the country. And they liked it so much they classified our work. So I can't give you the links to these sites at the moment, but they are working up a declassified version. So stay tuned, but that's the AI blog down there on the lower left. So moving along, this is just a quick shot at our architecture. We're not going to dwell on this. You have the slides, and if you're ever curious, I always like to show you behind the scenes, how do we host this and what are we doing, right? But we're going to get to the fun stuff, the AI art and all the cool stuff. And you may be wondering, why did we call it STEAMy? Well, of course it's STEAM. It's science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and of the arts. And of course, without the arts, that creativity piece that inspires me so, that sets me on fire. Because you have to realize all the stuff I'm showing you, I do for free as a volunteer, and I've done so for over 15 years, right? Now, in my day job, hey, Rhiannon, welcome. All I've been doing so far is setting the scene with the early stuff. And by the way, the slide I showed you with the TensorFlow stuff and the neural networks, that was for my AI class. So I have my teaching practice, right? And then I have my research practice, and the two come together beautifully in the virtual world. Without the virtual world and a way of simulating games and leadership activities, and we simulate plane crashes to understand the power of communications. We simulate medical bioinformatics and research to study those intricacies. We simulate what would it take to breathe on Mars? What would it take to fly there? What would it take to eat? And I know you're thinking, it's going to take a lot more than you, and you're absolutely right. But that's okay. I believe in the power of collective wisdom and in many voices investigating and thinking using different tactics and strategies than we've used in the past. And of course, you know what I'm basing it on. How many of you are aware of Fold It? Give me a yes or no in the text chat. Hey, Phil, so good to see you. Anyone heard of Fold It? Give me a yes or no. Okay, good. There's some no's. Fold It in 2010 or maybe 2011, the years flow by, right? Gamers in 2 to 3 weeks using this protein folding game that's free out of the University of Washington were able to solve the HIV protease. Have you ever wondered why we don't hear about HIV as this deadly, terrible thing as we did in the past? Yeah, now you remember, and that's good. So using those tactics of crowdsourcing, and here's what's so interesting: we're not just crowdsourcing a knowledge base. People ages 6 through 72 or older can grab a little piece of the puzzle and just tinker with it. They don't have to have prior knowledge about the process. And here's what I think is beautiful about it: they don't know their limitations. They don't know the science necessarily. So they don't have to worry about getting it wrong or looking bad. Most of us have the burden of I don't want to look foolish, right? We don't want to make mistakes. We don't get caught. And so we have this terrible burden. And of course, scientists had worked on this for more than 10 years, and it would be unfair to say that they were unsuccessful due to one thing or another. I think anytime we're simulating a supercomputer and putting hundreds of thousands or more people against a problem or systems, we get some interesting results, right? In any event, this slide here is just showing you the SageMaker dashboard and some of the things we can do and look at, but it's not showing you any data because we went under a classification. So even though I do not have an active security clearance, I've had several in the past. Many of you know I used to work for Air Force Space Command in a mirror image of the Situation Room, running the large wall screens that you might have seen in the movie War Games if you watched movies in the 80s, right? And there we are. Yeah, it's not showing any data, and that's why it's not. We cannot show data in any event. Um, but I did want you to know that we're working on these things and that this is a crowdsourced effort from not just military. I'm civilian. I work for 5 universities, including Colorado Technical University, where I've taught for 27 years. And I'm passionate about research. Now, Joyce, we're moving into your content, so I'm going to pass the microphone over to you, and she's going to talk about AI generated content. I'm going to wait till your sound comes on, Joyce. I don't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. You sound great. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, today's been a whirlwind. I left myself logged in AFK after Nonprofit Commons while I went to go get my much delayed physical. But all seemingly all is okay. So hello everybody. I will try to talk a little slower too, since that's a thing. Uh, some of you, and I'm sure Lyr mentioned this too, but I'm gonna pull besides the links that are right in front of you, which I'll put in chat um, for later, and we'll paste this again later. But that's the link to the slides that you're seeing here. There's a resource doc, and I'm sure Lyr probably mentioned too that this is kind of one of a series, like it sort of jumped originally from an OSCC workshop that then we've been kind of modifying and customizing a bit depending upon audience and bringing a bit a bit more or less on the hands-on workshopy nature. And she may have mentioned too that we will be doing the VW MOOC, which will be a bit more hands-on-y workshopy hopefully. So yes. So yeah, you can look at those things later. There is also as I go through things, and you'll see the list on this thing here, but there's also a link for on our Avicon Discord server. We have Blue Willow and Midjourney integrated into it, and because both of those happen to use Discord as a way to prompt those AI models in order to create images. So we sort of did a bot add-on in both of those places. Blue Willow is open source AI image generator, and Midjourney is a very popular one, and probably the one with the most sort of the best, quickest results if you're looking for image creation. And then also there's that Pinterest board link that has a bunch of stuff in it that is stuff we'll talk about, and then a lot of other things, a lot of videos too to reference to from both folks from kind of folks in the space too that are good kind of to look at. So, and I think she just pulled the content for this. Great. Okay. So the slide that we have on here right now, and one of the things that we've done in these presentations before, and we're not going to get into kind of the hands-on playing, but many of you probably are familiar with AI generated content. Yeah, and actually I should ask, like, how many of you have played around with an AI generated text a related tools like AI, like Google Bard or ChatGPT. And I'll put that in here. Okay,
I
great.
already did, Rhiannon. I'll do that for you.
Cool. That's great. And then, so yeah, any of those texts like ChatGPT, Bard, and then also on the, and then of course that also includes, and I put at the bottom for the image creator, but Bing also has a chat search engine thing too as well. But how many of you played around with generating through AI, generating like creative content, whether that be images, video, sound, because you can do all of that through AI. um, with, of course, images being the most prevalent that most people are using. So, and again, you have it in the chat here. It's also in the slides. So these are kind of some of the more popular content creation things. And Lyr, I'm sure, got into this a bit too about the whole kind of algorithms and sort of how all that works. But there's a lot of training, large data sets behind both, whether it be text or image or video or audio. And then we're all entering in prompts as the user to create those, text, 2D art, music, tech, or any of those, or 3D stuff. So, and so definitely I would say if you're looking at, like, if you've yet to try or if you've only tried a little bit, probably Google Bard and ChatGPT are like at the top of the list, I would think, on the text ones. And then when we get into those other 3D the image content creators, the ones that are probably the most prevalent in those, like you have DALL-E, and DALL-E is out of the same makers, OpenAI, which though OpenAI is the name of their business, they're actually not open source. Though the research that they were doing was open. The company that was birthed from that is not open. So it is more of a subscription model to use any of those OpenAI tools. But so DALL-E 2 is a prominent image generated one. Stable Diffusion is another one, and Stable Diffusion is open source. So yes, certainly Midjourney. So a lot of, there's a list of all these apps. There's a couple of them that are actually relying on Stable Diffusion as a base, and then maybe kind of modifying and training models more or integrating into their products. So often when you go to some smaller image related creation AI tools, they may have Stable Diffusion under the hood that they're actually using as their base kind of software model for the AI. So that's an open source one. And then some of the others, like Night Cafe, is geared, I think, much more towards kind of truer art things. And then Midjourney again is probably the best for the quickest results if you pull in. And I'll have a slide later to kind of compare Midjourney. It's also the one that has kind of been the most continually, like, frequently updated Sometimes for things like the OpenAI models, they're such large data sets that they're using, and also Stable Diffusion, that the updates that they make come slower. And by slower, it's still fast by software development means. Lyr and I were going over, and I don't know if any of you have a, I think it will only be visible if you have a paid account to Midjourney, but we were going over images and I was sharing the link to my Midjourney profile. And Midjourney has basically been in existence for just about a little over a year. So, and then, and even like when you look at things like ChatGPT, Google Bard, all these things are all, you know, fairly within the last, you know, even when in their earlier developments, fairly within the last couple of years. Some of them, you know, so these things continually keep changing, um, and new tools and updates to models will come out as they come along. But Midjourney definitely has had the most, I think, evolution in regards to it continuing to update its model. That, which means both the output that you get back changes over time because of those updates. So, um, and then obviously I brought up Microsoft Bing. They is an image creator and a text and text integrated into the search AI text. So you can certainly play around with that if you have if you use Microsoft Bing, or it may be now a main reason why some people went back to using Microsoft Bing, right? So certainly you can check that out. Yes, yeah, it was probably very low on most people's radars for social for search engines, but I think it's again gotten quite a resurgence over the fact that Microsoft and Microsoft partners with ChatGPT, with OpenAI, so it's also a kind of a variant and a direct collaboration with OpenAI than what's happening um, in their in Bing. The other thing I wanted to bring up, and we won't get into this too much, but I shared the link before, even with Marie Vans and Ellie. Let me grab that link again. Another, though, very relevant for many of you who are educators. I didn't include this link yet because it's kind of a more recent thing. Like within the last, I think since CES, which is the computer electronics show that happened maybe about a month ago. Many of you may know Saul Khan, who is from Khan Academy, who's the founder of that. He also is working with ChatGPT with OpenAI to integrate a very perfected or perfected to what they want, right, to the needs of an educator, where and some of the shortcomings of what ChatGPT is, and I know Lyr will get into that more later when she brings up some of her examples. Um, but it's much more geared towards education, with the idea that Khan Academy has this sort of universal video content learning of a lot of STEAM subjects, and now they're integrating this a AI agent called Conmigo, like Amigo, but with Con merged with it, as a personal kind of learning assistant. The concept of a personal learning assistant for all learners on Khan Academy's sites, so they can, so it keeps track of what they've done, what their learning thing is, questions that may ask over time, their strengths and weaknesses, and kind of guides them. So they're really getting into this idea of a personal learning tutor for life, right? Which is one of, among, you know, if you counter it to many of the scary thoughts or the future possible repercussions of AI and the way that it is right now, or where it's going, this is definitely one of the more positive outlooks. And I have a couple of videos on that Pinterest AI generated content board that there's some content there from videos from Saul Khan, and I really recommend them because, especially for an educational sense, his outlook is very realistic with both, you know, what it means for the changes ahead for technology and learning, but also like the benefits. So check out that. Very, very new in regards to that. So,
Wonderful. I'm going to jump in here for just a moment.
sure.
And how many of you remember IBM Watson? Just a quickie here. IBM Watson, was sold, the health side of that business. Interestingly, January 2022, right? Timing is everything, huh? And in any event, IBM Watson, similar to what she was describing, we went to a conference where delightful Duwangle, Barbara Truman, who unfortunately we lost in 2021, was giving a keynote, and we had a vice president from the IBM Watson team who explained that they were doing a lifelong learning project. I would love to see the IRB for that, where they were taking grade school children, and IBM Watson was going to be their study buddy throughout life, throughout grade school, high school, college, with the workplace, all the way up through retirement. So it was going to be one of these, the largest ethnographic study. It sounded like the Truman Show, right? Only the kids would be aware of this. And yeah, that is long term, because most of us know we have to reapply every year to extend the collection of data once we're approved, right? So it becomes a process. But what was interesting is they wanted to understand the impact over time on the positive and any areas in which we might have concerns or need to rethink our strategies. So there's a lot going on in education in these. It's not just about Jeopardy, right? Anyway, here's your second slide there, Joyce. I'm going to pass it back over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, that's all. And to be fair, like Watson in some ways is really I think the beginnings of this large language model kind of concept, and I mean different approaches Lyr was saying, but like it really is the birth of this. So as much as things immediately in the last 2 years might have seemed to like exponentially arch up, it really has a much longer tail to it. And there's some in that Google Doc that we put together. There's some early stuff in there, going back to some of the folks, even, with AI audio and sound stuff that Ray Kurzweil was doing back when he was working on the synthesizers, the Kurzweil synthesizers, which were the sort of the beginnings before he was really known as a futurist. So the main thing that I'm kind of focusing in on, and again, there's all these amazing tools, and there's lots of things like that, but ultimately we're interfacing with them all in similar ways, right, through these prompts, which is a huge improvement, because otherwise before this, like, you had to be a programmer, you had to be somebody like Lyr, right, or others that were computer science, scientists in some way, or in order to be really programming AI and being able to like put the data together, modify, create models, modify them, implement that sort of stuff. But for many of us, myself included, now we can interact with these tools just simply by, typing to them, giving prompts in some way, right? So, prompts are, in essence, as it says up in the slide, prompts are descriptions in natural language, and you can copy paste this, Lyr, even right from the slide if you want. So there are descriptions in natural language that act as an input for AI text and art generators, and we listed off, such as ChatGPT and Midjourney and all those ones, and other machine learning models like that. So they can be as simple as a single line of text, or even just a word. You can put in a single word, right? Love, and type love into Midjourney, and Midjourney will come back with an image, depending upon that. So, or they can be highly descriptive, and we'll get into a bit of what that means, right? So like almost like a formulaic, like, I want this in my thing, and I want them doing this, and I want this medium, and and this style, and or they can be vague, as I was saying. Prompts can also be images if you're working with an image generator, so you can actually just put an image in, or an image and text, to then prompt the AI to kind of jump from there with the kind of image that you want. So and crafting prompts is an art form in itself, and I would say, conceivably too, the more AI evolves, There will be, you know, I mean, I wouldn't just say art, I would also say science to it as well. So I think, and Lyr has some thoughts about that. I know she put together some stuff in the class that she taught, and she could talk a little bit about the syllabus and all the good stuff that she went with that. But certainly there's a whole section I know on prompt crafting and related stuff like that. Um, and so it's discovering inputs that yield desirable or useful results basically is what your goal is for prompting. And then you can add extra parameters to your prompt to refine the image results or the text that you get back. And I also want to mention that all the images in the slides, they'll have little citations under them. And all these particular images were created from Midjourney. So, and you can look below to sort of see, though we're not playing in Midjourney today, you can kind of get a feel for like actual prompts, right? So the robot wearing a chef's hat and holding a spatula. The robot is in a kitchen, looking at a recipe, colorful, futuristic style. So that's the particular prompt for this image. And to me, the reason why that I was going for this is because in some ways prompting is a bit like recipe craft in a way too, right? That putting all, you know, kind of listing off all the things that you need and the desirable outcome that you want, right? So in regards to, no, I did not specify female chef. It just sort of, you know, I mean, you certainly can, you know, like gender and age or you know, racial or background or things that you want to specify. Is it an animal? You know, all that kind of stuff. So it shows that. And there were a few others. And, you know, for myself, I have, like I said, I have a paid account to Midjourney. So I do uh, a lot of kind of trial and error where I might give a prompt and then try to generate many images before I get one that kind of is like what I might want to use. So, and you can keep iterating in that same way.
Pardon me
Uh,
for stepping in for just a moment, but we're at a 4 minute check and we
sure.
have
I think, are we only going to
75.
4:40? I thought we were till the end of the hour. Am I
No,
wrong?
we have 40 minutes, I think. Although it's up to our hosts, you guys let me
I
know.
thought we
They
were
said
till hour.
40, and you know
Well,
how I am. I'm a
actually,
teacher. Yes.
so I guess what we were hoping to have is at least 10 minutes at the end. But we
For
could probably take
questions,
it
we're
till,
doing
yeah,
interactive. Yeah.
Is that like
yeah.
sort of 4:50?
Hey,
I
great.
would say,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, 1:50. I'm looking at my time.
And then we have a few more announcements to do at the very end. I need
Okay.
about 2 minutes
Okay.
for that, and that's it.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
So prompt engineering. You know, I have listed here, and you can see it in the slides too. But basically, there's sort of two, like we have two different distinct types of models, and um, at least in regards to what most of us are interacting with, and they kind of have similar but slightly different approaches in how you might um, interact with them to prompt them, right? So there's these transformer large language model um, AI models, like we were talking about the text ones like Google Bard and ChatGPT. So they're ingesting all that information from the internet and books and other places. And sorry, it went blurry for a second there. And then when you prompt them, they're using all of that language, that sort of information store to be able to sort of start guessing. Well, if you've said these things, then you should be you know, you should be then the next natural language that should, or results that should come out of it, would be based around other similar patterns that they see. Well, if you're talking about a horse, maybe you know what you're coming up with would revolve around certain things from that. So they're kind of making those sort of guidelines. So, but of course, this can also include making up things, so they can lie or, as they say, hallucinate, right? And they're generally better at editing than creating, right? You can get it to write free-form creative writing. You certainly can get it to write, but the more specificity you put into it in the beginning, and the better you're prompting at it. So in some ways, more text is better than less in something like ChatGPT. So what I have up on the left side's image next to the AI transformers text is kind of a good mapping of what you might use for things like ChatGPT. So like, you can almost think of it like role playing. Like you inhabit like, okay, I am a educator and I, want to create a curriculum based off of this particular thing where these things need to be addressed on this particular, subject matter or book or whatever, and then like and then give it maybe some background, like maybe they're students in this particular age grouping. They're we're expecting it to have these particular of interactions that want to come out of it, those kind of things, and then kind of execute from there, and it would be able to give you back better results than if you're just like write me my syllabus for this, right? So and again, the slides have the link to this graphic, which comes from, if you're interested, he's more of a social media data analytics person. But Chris Penn and his Trust Insights company came up with this like kind of approach to how you can do it. There's some great videos on there. There's a couple of his videos also on that Pinterest board. And this particular handout you can get through that link at the bottom, and you can actually download it and use it as a resource for your prompting. And there are so many more prompt tools out there for both graphics and text, and that Google Doc we have kind of has a lot of them. So on the image side, again, those are diffusion models, so they're a little bit different, where they're kind of like they're fed off of still large models of all these images and artworks and things like that, which has its own ethical ups and downs, right? And then, but often when it's being trained on that, its knowledge of, well, what is this visual image? Most of the what is this is coming from either humans entering in the data. This is an image of whatever. Think about like your CAPTCHA tools, right? Find all the buses in this graphic, right? Or others, or citations from the artworks, or accompanying text that might have been with the image. Yes. So the prompting kind of works on that. The best prompts for that work a little bit like you're writing a citation, right? An image citation. So as much as you can sort of like break it down into those component parts, like, I want, a picture of a cat that is, sitting in this particular landscape, or in, whatever, and then what medium I want it to be, a watercolor, and, in the style of whatever particular artist or art movement, or those kind of things. And then you can get into, can you just go back for a second, please? Then you can get into the quality and the dimensions and other specific things, like, is it a photograph, is it illustration, is it computer graphics, like, is it a CryEngine 3D render, all those kind of things. And a lot of that takes playing around with, and that graphic below kind of gets a bit more into it, and that's another article that's great reading on sort of setting up visual prompts. But that's kind of the basis of the difference between a text and a visual prompting. So you can now go, sorry. And I had said earlier something like Midjourney, but this is an example. Midjourney, as I said, has had multiple versions over time. And in the past year, they've gone through 5 versions and what that means is they keep fine tuning their large model to be able to have people get better image results. And better is in quotations, because there's some people that like stylistically some versions of Midjourney for certain purposes over others. It becomes like almost like an artistic medium decision. So the current default version is 5. But you can actually change, so if you start playing with Midjourney, you can change and go back and try the other versions. And you can kind of see here, version 1's, and you can see the prompt. It might be a little hard to read. It's in the lower left. I just put a dog at a computer. No visual style, no nothing, just that simple phrase. And, version 1 is very like, it's sort of like, looks like weird cut and paste collage. Maybe there's a dog parts there, there's a lot of computer parts and they kind of squished them together, right? And then you've got that dog at a computer for version 2, and it's sort of like, again, parts of a dog, but at least now we recognize a face. And there's a computer, he's kind of on the computer, maybe that, but it's sort of, and it's not a full dog. And then you get to version 3, which is now we've got a dog on a screen at a computer. But certainly the dog is more definably a dog now. The computer is more of a computer now. So, uh, and then like if you look at version 4, you kind of have a little bit more of that sort of stylized things. Um, but you're getting a little bit closer to there, right? It's definitely a dog at a computer. I mean, we've kind of got a bunch of keyboards, and I'm sure if you looked closely, of which is a good way to sort of tell AI apart. There's often quirks within eyes or numbers of fingers or how limbs are placed or ears or things that will give that definitely away. And then by version 5, you have, you know, definitely that is a dog, and he's at somebody's desk. There's a couple monitors there and a keyboard, and it looks pretty much like, well, maybe somebody took that photo, right? Again, I'm sure if you looked at it, and to be fair, it doesn't have to be a photo. In this case, it just was pulling up whatever it default wanted. You could stylize this by putting in what mediums and what artists and whatever, but it gives you a good feel of how like this AI model has evolved over time, and even with given the same prompts, how those results have changed. And you'll get this too when you test out many tools, depending upon how that model's level of sophistication or geared towards a particular style or set of things. Its data set is so. And I think that's mostly it for me. But I'll put the links in later on. You could definitely play, and we'll be around later on in the Avacon Discord server. So you can go, Lyr.
We aren't
And I don't
hearing
think we can hear you. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
not
we
hearing
can't
you, Lyr.
Let's see if you can hear me now. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
This is these next set of images are from my Second Life Endowment for the Arts exhibition that just closed, and it was AI generated art. And what I did was my prompt wove in the Peripheral from William Gibson, both the book and the TV series on Amazon. And that's the notion of going from 2032 in a game to wearing a heads-up display device and going to 2099 in the future. This notion of portals and bridging between worlds and thinking about a dystopian future and how can we affect the future by affecting the past. And I saw the similarities to AI and the questions we ask about explainable AI. Because the people designing AI, while we know how we designed it, you reach a stage if you train it with enough data where it starts having these emergent properties, this machine learning effect, and then you start having a very difficult time explaining why ChatGPT lied to you, right? And by the way, when it lies to you, I asked it to give me my references, the works that I published that were published before 2021. And it gave me 5 references that I did not publish, and it put my name on it. It put my middle initial on it, which I do not use, and Dr. Stricker. But it said we published in medical journals, and we had done all these amazing science things that we had not done. So I pointed out to it that it had lied, and I do not call that hallucinating because it's not sentient. If it was sentient, it might hallucinate, but I don't think that a machine at this point has reached the age of sentience, and you can debate that with me. I'm welcome to it. But so I told it. I said, "Hey, that's inaccurate," and it said, "Oh, I'm so very sorry," and it apologized profusely, and then it lied again, and it fabricated another 6 references that I did not do. And here's the problem: that data is now part of its history, if you will. And so someone might search for my written works and pull up those references that are erroneous. What will happen to my reputation if people think that I am fabricating my past work, right? And so I just want you to know that that to me is one of the dark sides of large language generative models that are inaccurate, imprecise, or lie. And by the way, when I call it a lie, I mean a lie. I mean it intentionally fabricated and it knew it did it, okay? That's what irritates me. Imagine if you went to a search engine and you asked it, you gave it a query, and it just gave you whatever it felt like instead of what you asked for. How would you feel over time? So anyway, and I apologize several times. In another talk and in some of the resources, I show you an example of that. So if you go to the resource doc in the OpenAI section, I show you that. But here's an example of what the AI exhibit looked like in Second Life. And I generated all these images. And I first started with the eyes of a child looking at a secret garden through a portal to that dystopian future, right? And then I looked backwards through the portal and I saw the effects of that. The interesting thing is I bridged in the romantic period with Thomas Cole's The Voyage of Life. And The Voyage of Life is lovely. It's very lush and romantic. And here's the examples. It's childhood, it's youth, it's manhood and old age. And it's at the National Gallery of Art. It's Creative Commons Zero. It's part of their open access. So if you are going to generate AI art, I recommend that you consciously make a decision to bridge with works that you know are available, right? That we're not infringing on someone else's rights. Because I do feel that ethics and safety and explainable AI, all of these topics matter to us. And we want to be proactive and conscious about it. So here's what it generated based on those artworks that you just saw. And I love these. You know why I love them? And why I think STEAM is important in STEM? The arts inspire me. They get me up in the morning when I'm tired. They help me to work long days and 7 days a week, and to work and volunteer and to think about how this affects me. I created this, and sure, I can't draw, I can't paint. I can use, Adobe tools. I can use GIMP and Blender, but this is amazing to me. And yet you'll notice these flowers look wrong, don't they? On the right there, that's what Joyce was getting at. Sometimes things will have a few extra fingers. I see the time, so I'll wrap it up. I took the children out of the prompt, while the one on the right kind of mirrors what we were doing in the peripheral. You kind of see images of what could be London, perhaps, or some other place in the future. But the difficulty was I started getting images with sexual organs in them. We'll just say that, okay? And I thought, wow, and this isn't even subliminal. I thought, I'm starting to see a lot of them, and I thought it's a little disturbing to me personally to see children in the same image. So for those of you who ask the questions about gender, racism, perhaps adult content, you're going to see that. And so you have to personally make the decision to filter it. They try to do so. And of course, you could say I have a dirty mind if I'm seeing penises everywhere, right? But I did. A lot of these rock formations in an earlier version, looked very interesting. I'll just say that, okay? And I love castles, I love dragons, I love fantasy. And so I asked for these to be woven into my prompts. And you'll notice it took away the portal because I no longer asked for portals. So we're no longer looking through a window, right? But notice the dragons coming out of the mountain on the left, okay? And you'll notice that the bird there has 3 wings. and I know we have to wrap, so we're just about at the end of our content. You'll notice some other problems here, but I still love these. And you know what I love about them? Even though the dragon's now part of the tower on the left and on the right, the body is in motion. And so you could say it was almost like taking a photo where you're seeing all the different frames, right, of a video, in still motion, if you will, which sounds so redundant, doesn't it? But anyway, I love the fact that it started giving me these glowy caves underneath and the reflections in the water. So there were certain elements that just appealed to my senses. The Thomas Cole bit, if you saw in the clouds some images like you do over here on the left, that's part of the Voyage of Life. He does that too, because he is thinking about the dream space and our dreams and how we realize them. So I love this. It inspires me and strengthens me, and it is my muse. So after the exhibit, I started generating these for a sci-fi take. I'm writing a book, and I'm using portals within virtual worlds to go to other planets. Okay, so so I said, what would that look like? And this is the result, in case you're wondering. And then I said, oh, but I need more lush vegetation, and I need more romance and more mystery, and this is what it came up with. Okay. And then I says, oh, but where's the science? I need more of Asimov and Heinlein, and I need to think about their book covers. I need to start thinking visually, and so I came up with this. And here we are at our last slide, which has our resources that I've been pasting in here, and I'll paste these in again, and I'll let Joyce close for us. Thank you all for coming. Over to you, Rhiannon. And we cannot hear you if you're speaking.
Unmute, it helps. But thank you, and thank you for all for the patience for before that I wasn't able to be here right away. So yeah, there's so much more to play. I think my biggest takeaway with all this is, though some people, I mean, there is definitely tensions in the future and positives in the future, and the thing is though is some people call for the stop of it, but there is no stop because there are many models that are open source, and so Pandora's box has already been opened, and the best that all of us can do is learn about all these tools because it will definitely influence all of our kind of the world around us, and certainly both in education and other professional pursuits. And I'll have to put another couple links in here. It even has been cited even in the most recent SAG-AFTRA Screen Actors Guild strike about how AI is moving things or other things like that. So it is going to permeate through, I think, lots of things, and definitely learn as much as you can about AI generated content and tools, and don't be afraid to play. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Lyr and Rhi. Big round of applause. That was really eye-opening. I have one question for you. I think we have time for, and that is when you said that the whole thing about how it came up with some bogus publications. Is there a way, or should we be working on a way that would allow us to correct those problems in the AI engines?
I'll tackle that one. Correct is an interesting point. See, it's been trained with a lot of data, and it parses data, and the word parse means to analyze, and it tries to make sense of it. In our system, and I'm not completely familiar with their entire architecture, but my research partner is indeed beta testing ChatGPT 5 and working on 6 with them. So that's the good news. They invited us to I participate, if you will, because of our enthusiasm, right? And so, so what we do is we have an ontology and classification system, and that's because we built ours with explainable AI in mind. In other words, how do you explain its behavior, its decisions, and its progress? So your question is asking, how do we clean up the fact that it's making bad decisions? It's like a preteen who is a compulsive fibber, or it will say fibber. Perhaps that sounds nicer, but I really think that the machine should be an adult. How many of you ever experienced that? It reminds me of the humor of Eddie Izzard, where he talks about talking to a teenager who just always says the wrong thing. Did you brush your teeth? No. Yes. I was on the moon with Steve. Whatever the answers are, right? And so you have to ask yourself, how would you clean that up? Well, you first have to understand, has it migrated its behavior? Does it have emergent behavior that has colored or modified the way you programmed that it should classify, rank, prioritize, and discern what's the most likely answer? What's a reasonable candidate for this context, right? And that's the difficulty, is sometimes with these very large language models and the basis for them, we're not always sure why it's doing what it's doing. Now, I personally thought maybe they were being kind to education, so they had put in a little code that said always give the wrong references. That way, if students falsify their papers and do a ChatGPT paper, and if you did not see the South Park episode called Deep Learning from a few weeks ago, you need to see it. It's hilarious, and it makes fun of everyone, but it's funny. Um, But I thought maybe it's trying to help us out, right? By making it discernible, easy to discern that someone has used AI in their papers. And that way, the students would have to look up all the references first to see which ones are wrong. Secondly, to get the right ones, right? And then third, to reseed it. And by the time they do that, they've reverse engineered the AI contribution that it provided to them and improved on it. And learning occurs when they do that, right? So I thought at first it was intentional, but no one's admitting to that. Over to you, Joyce, to answer that one.
Yeah, so I put in that question, though not education specific, but ultimately, it's going to lie with the models, and there's going to have to be regulations in play for those bigger, larger things, right? And with something like the EU's GDPR laws, that's already been a case, right? That's already been kind of dealt. So there are certain tools that I know Dex mentioned, like, oh, I can't use that. That's because Dex is in the EU, right? So some part of it is that they're limiting usage of certain things, but some of it is too that OpenAI, ChatGPT, and others like that are going to specifically have to deal with regulation, and more than likely, I mean, as we see, it's definitely starting and coming from the EU first. Uh, and there's many articles on it, like, but look up, GDPR, ChatGPT, AI, regulation, and that would help with this problem and also many other things. This particular article I pasted talks about, many of the problems with both in regards to privacy and misinformation and copyright, problems, and there's many of that to come, so more than likely the long answer is regulation is going to have to be, that, though again there's open source models, so the ability for that stuff to already be out there is kind of out of the box, even if ChatGPT specifically or other software companies decide to or need make changes due to regulation.
Okay, thank you. So we are at the end of the hour, but we should be able to continue the conversation with our presenters if they can stay at the happy hour space behind us. You can find all of our scheduled events on the calendar here in World, as well as the following URL. I've also put the YouTube channel in this chat, and if you are interested in presenting here at the plaza, please fill out a form that I've also put the URL in for. Once again, let's give Rhiannon and Lyr a big hand.
Thank you.
Thank you.